Let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a story that is literally straight out of a movie. We're talking about the life of Ishmael. He is this incredible biblical archetype for survival, marginalization, and completely unexpected divine providence. It's a wildly fascinating and often totally misunderstood story. So let's just get right into it.
We have to start with his name because it's really the key to the whole thing. Ishmael literally translates to God hears. And here's the crazy part. This wasn't some title he earned after growing up and doing something great. This was a promise given to his displaced mom, Hagar, out in a harsh wilderness before he was even born. God met her there, completely alone, and stamped this unborn child's identity with a profound sense of divine attention.
Section 1. Born in the margins. Conceived in tension.
So Ishmael's life basically kicks off right at this incredibly tense crossroads of human desire and divine promise. He wasn't the direct fulfillment of what God had originally promised Abraham, right? Honestly, his conception was more like an attempt to force a promised outcome through a human shortcut. And for 13 whole years, Ishmael was Abraham's one and only son. Just imagine that. For over a decade, he's the apparent heir, basking in his dad's love, living right in the center of the camp. But it was all a provisional gig. Everything was held in this delicate tension until the structural arrival of Isaac.
Section 2. The shift that changed everything, from the center to the edges.
When Isaac, this long-awaited miracle baby, finally shows up, Ishmael gets hit with a massive, heartbreaking displacement. The text tells us Sarah saw Ishmael scoffing or mocking. We don't exactly know what that interaction was, but to her, it was a massive threat. And that one single observation triggers a totally non-negotiable demand. Cast out this slave woman with her son. Boom, no discussion. It's a harsh, immediate division that literally threatens Ishmael's very existence.
You can imagine Abraham is just pierced to the core by this, but following God's instruction to actually listen to Sarah, an aching Abraham does the unthinkable. He packs up Hagar with severely limited provisions. We're talking just some bread, water, and basically a skin of hope wrapped in pure heartbreak. And he sends his teenage firstborn out into a burning, unforgiving desert.
Section 3. Survival in the wilderness. Loss without choice.
Having lost everything, his inheritance, his status, his home, and entirely without a say in the matter, Ishmael and his mom wander this arid wasteland. And eventually, the water completely runs dry. When their strength finally gives out, Hagar does something absolutely crushing. She places her severely dehydrated son under a solitary bush, walks away, and just weeps. She says, "Let me not see the death of the boy." She actually physically distances herself because she literally cannot bear to listen to his final breaths.
But right here, at the darkest possible moment, the whole narrative flips. God heard the voice of the lad. Notice that? Heaven doesn't just respond to the mother's tears. God specifically tunes in to the despairing, voiceless boy under the bush. The agency suddenly shifts straight to Ishmael himself. Even out there, in the absolute margins where humanity had thrown him, heaven is listening.
What happens next is this beautiful cascade of miraculous provision. The angel of God calls out from heaven, and instantly a hidden well is revealed right there in the desert. Hagar gives her dying boy water, and Ishmael is redirected. He lives. His story gets a total reboot, not by going back to Abraham's camp, but by forging an entirely new, independent path out in the desert of Paran as a master archer.
Section 4. The multiplication of Ishmael. A life that becomes a people.
Remember that earlier promise God made, that Ishmael would become a great nation? Well, that wasn't just some poetic feel-good fluff to comfort a crying mom. Ishmael survived and his family exploded with historical magnitude. And check out this crazy structural parallel. 12. Just like the 12 tribes of Israel that eventually emerged from Isaac's line, Ishmael also becomes the father of 12 sons. He even had a daughter who later marries Isaac's son Esau, which is just a wild, ironic twist that permanently intertwines their family destinies.
And these 12 sons weren't just abstract names on a genealogy chart. They grew into fierce tribal leaders, literal princes of their own domains. In a surprising twist of history, their descendants ended up controlling some of the most lucrative and highly strategic trade routes in the ancient world, dominating massive expanses of land bordering Egypt and Assyria.
You see, unlike the heavily centralized covenant nation of Israel that would form later on, Ishmael's line built this incredibly resilient, highly mobile network of independent peoples. They lived an expansive lifestyle, totally distinct from any centralized authority.
They laid the early foundations of the Arabian world, perfectly fulfilling that ancient prophecy that Ishmael would be a wild donkey of a man, independent, tough, and thriving out in the open wilderness.
Section 5. Two Paths, Two Destinies. The Theological Mirror.
If we fast forward centuries later into the New Testament, the Apostle Paul actually picks up this exact family drama in the book of Galatians to explain a deeply profound spiritual truth. He uses the two brothers as a vivid contrast. On the one side you have Ishmael, representing human effort, the flesh, and bondage. On the other side there's Isaac, representing divine promise, the spirit, and freedom. Paul uses this to highlight the stark difference between relying on human performance versus relying on miraculous grace. But crucially, he does all this without ever condemning the historical person of Ishmael.
At its core, this explainer is really showing us a story about two paths, two covenants, and two totally distinct destinies. Paul's main point is that you cannot inherit the promises of God through sheer willpower, striving, and human works. You just can't. You can only inherit them through faith by trusting in the miraculous work of the Spirit, exactly like how Isaac was a literal miracle of God's intervention.
So Ishmael really becomes this ultimate archetype. He's born through human initiative, gets displaced by a greater promise, and completely loses his VIP status in the center of the camp. But he does not lose his life. He is sustained by divine care out there on the edges. His life proves without a doubt that finding yourself outside the primary covenantal line absolutely does not mean you're rejected or excluded from God's compassion.
Because here's a beautiful reality. God sees those we might overlook. Ishmael's survival is literal. Living proof that even when humanity slams the door in your face, and even when society tosses someone to the absolute margins, heaven might just open a window of profound mercy. God simply does not abandon what He allows to come into existence.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought to chew on. Which son are you living like right now? Are you burning yourself out relying on your own exhausting human effort? Or are you trusting in grace? And maybe on a more personal level, have you ever felt totally unseen, cast out into your own desert? As you reflect on your wilderness moments, hold on to the deepest truth of Ishmael's story. You absolutely do not need to be the chosen one, standing right in the center of the camp, to be heard, seen, and fiercely protected by God.